Chapter 13.
Okay, so prostate cancer. As I said, Peter Starr, I met in Los Angeles probably 2-3 years ago now, and he wanted to do an interview with me on my approach towards treating prostate cancer problems. And I said, well, Peter, I'm not an expert in the field. You know, I don't make anything about treating prostate. I treat patients, and I can give you my expertise from the biochemistry point of view, and that's what I did. And obviously all these interviews, he interviewed me for a couple of hours with the film team, and then that was all edited out. And he did a wonderful job. And he's interviewed, as I say, 30-40 people. Is there a disc there? Have we got the disc of the prostate? They've all gone. Okay, have you got my bag? Because I think there's one in the bottom of my hold-all there, which has a rather interesting photograph on the first thing, which is a hand with a rubber glove on it. You ladies don't know what you're missing. Okay.
Don't even go.
Well, you have a rubber glove put somewhere else. I know. But it's a 3-disc. See, there's the rubber glove girls, just to prove that what we have to go through. You've been through it. That's it. Bob went through it, and he only went to the doctor for a cold. He was a bit worried. It wasn't a cold, you said. It was a sore throat, yeah, but why the doctor had to examine that end is a difficult matter. He was a bit amazed, but I suppose because he went, he got his breathing back working again. Okay, so there's 3 discs in there, and you know, I have no hesitation to someone who talks about that to recommend it, okay? Because it gives you the ideas. But so I thought, well, let's go through them. I spent some time going through them, and so you have this proceed. So do they have the sheet? There's a prostate sheet in there. It's a handout sheet, an A4 sheet on prostates. Is it in there? If it's not, we'll pop it on the web. Okay. It's a sheet. It's an A4 sheet which summarises all the things that we're going to mention. If it's not, we'll put it on the website anyway. Yeah, if you want more of the DVDs, we'll happily get them, and I'm glad people are buying them because they give so much hope to men who are despair when they're given news like this, and it's totally unnecessary, as we'll see. Right. So, just to refresh ourselves on the steroid hormones. Remember, the steroid hormones are produced in the adrenal cortex and the gonads. So obviously we're talking about the testicles in the male, but it's the same thing with the ovaries with the female. So with the male, the emphasis has been about testosterone and its conversion to dihydrotestosterone, which we know is inactive testosterone in certain locations in the body and has receptors on the prostate gland. So it was thought that if you could block this 5-alpha reductase enzyme from testosterone to dihydro, you would decrease the amount of dihydrotestosterone, so you would decrease the prostate problem. And this has proved to be not particularly true, but the real issue with most prostates is the conversion of testosterone to estradiol, where it's bound on, and estrogens or estrogens and testosterone bind onto the same receptor site on the prostate. So if there's estrogen around, it binds on, and if there's testosterone, it binds on. And unfortunately, as men get older, the conversion of testosterone to estrogen increases, and this aromatase enzyme here gets more active, or we're deficient in the aromatase inhibitors. So in many cases, we don't produce enough testosterone. So people who have high levels of testosterone, in fact, don't seem to get cancer of the prostate and prostate problems. It's more likely men with low testosterone and high estrogen or estradiol that get it. So what we do now, or most actually don't know, is that when the adrenals are exhausted, say in a green person, and we've really pushed our luck and our adrenals have gone over the top, we will suck the testosterone from our testes, okay? And then the testes go down, okay? So when a man's testes go down, and testosterone goes down, more often it's the adrenals which are exhausted and not the gonads, okay? The adrenals are simply taking the testosterone because it's identical and using it. So you can suck the testosterone, if you like, out of your testicles in order to back up your adrenals. So with a green person, go back and think, it's cortex, adrenal cortex. With the blue person, yes, you can say it's the gonads. Now, prostate cancer, and the key thing with this, as far as Peter's discs and interviews, and he gives about an hour's discourse to start, is that prostate cancer is a wake-up call. It's a wake-up call, like breast cancer, to do something about your life, where your mind is going and where your environment, your relationship to the environment, and the foods that you're eating, etc. 1 in 6 men will get prostate cancer, okay? 220,000 new cases in the USA are diagnosed each year. 2 million men in the USA are now living with prostate cancer. 168,000 men have their prostates removed each year at a cost of $45,000 each. So this adds up to a nice little bit of money. Okay, the death rate for prostate cancer has not changed since 1930, in spite of all this. 90% of cases could benefit from natural therapies. 10% of people, of men, have the aggressive form and need a more radical approach. Okay? But the other 90%, perhaps, as we'll see, don't need a more radical approach. And a more natural approach or no approach seems to be the best approach. So there are 10% who do need, the surgeries, the radiotherapy and the chemo, but for the other 90%, a more natural approach. Most deaths are from the treatment they receive and not the cancer. And that is really disturbing, isn't it? So most men are affected particularly by the surgery. The surgery, the chemotherapy, the radiotherapy can be really devastating. Not only, obviously, impotence, but incontinence, and the whole life falls apart. The prostate-specific antigen, PSA, of less than 10 do best with natural treatments. So those who don't have too high. So remember, PSAs, it's not so much about the level of the PSA, it's whether it changes. So big changes in the level over periods of time are more significant than probably the level itself. But according to all the interviews, less than 10 will do better. And we know that PSAs do go naturally up with age. So obviously a 70, 80, 90-year-old man is going to have a higher one than a 40 or 50 anyway. Surveillance patients, in other words, those who are just watched, outlive those who are having radiotherapy and surgery treatment often. Okay, so just those who are kept an eye on do better often than those who are given radiation and surgery. And most of it is driven by fear from the surgeons to try and get them to take the chemo, the therapy, and have the surgery. The prostate is 70% a gland, okay, and 30% a muscle, weighing just under 1 ounce. How much is an ounce? It's 28 grams, is it? Yeah, something like that. Okay, so it's not very heavy. The prostate needs exercise, as any muscle, to prevent stagnation. Very, very important. It needs to be exercised. Ask the man next to you. Ask him. Now, let's look at... Those are just general guys' comments, Fatima. Okay. Now, generally, putting a few ideas and things that were chopped and thrown in, and then I put them in a structured order. So estrogen agonists, many estrogen-like substances come from plastics, and it comes from particularly the soft plastics with the plasticizers, things like cling film and styrene. So polystyrene, so hot drinks in polystyrene contain styrenes, which are estrogen mimickers. More body fat, the higher the aromatase. So the body fat, the stored actual triglycerides, is where we actually manufacture aromatase, which increases our estrogens, okay, and conversion from androgens into estrogens, and therefore higher estradiol and estradiol. Animal fats adversely affect prostate cancer, so too much animal fat is not good. All cancer cells are low in oxygen and use anaerobic respiration. That's what we said this morning. This is where the B12 comes in. So these people, or most people, are B12 deficient anyway. But remember, we know we're looking at blue people, and blue people are hypoxic. You've got to get them into the Krebs cycle. You've got to get that pyruvate converted to acetyl-CoA and into citric acid. So think here, oxygen. How are we going to get oxygen in? B12 in its different forms, and iron if necessary. All cancer cells are low in oxygen and use anaerobic. Prostate cancer is like molds and also feeds on calcium, apparently. So this was an interesting, I'd never heard this, but it feeds on calcium. Adrenal cortex, we know, is for survival. So this is going to feel. Gonads are for reproduction. Therefore, long stress affects the adrenals and will take the testes hormones for support, which is what I was saying. So a green person can drain their gonads. If they drain out their adrenals, it'll borrow the testosterone from, or use the testosterone from the gonads, thus lowering testosterone and increasing estrogen. So long periods of stress will increase estrogen and decrease testosterone. Estrogens cause proliferation in the prostate, which is similar to the uterus. So the analogous organ to the prostate would be the uterus. Mineralocorticoids allow nutrients to get into the cell. So our mineralocorticoids are aldosterone and corticosterone in our steroid pathways. So these are important. So we need to have these at optimal levels to get our minerals in. So if we're depleted, we can't get our minerals into the cell. Progesterone buffers the effect of high levels of estrogen. So sometimes we look, when we do the cascade, you know, when we've done the hormones, we've looked at them in an order. So we've looked at the biologically active steroid hormones. So we've tested a person for progesterone, remember, first of all, and then aldosterone, and then cortisol, and then DHEA, and then the two testosterones, and then the estrogens. And that's it, that's how you work. All right? High progesterone may reduce levels of testosterone, causing erectile dysfunction. So we don't want a high progesterone where you can't convert it on to DHEA and on to testosterone. And that lyase pathway that converts progesterone across to DHEA and testosterone is zinc dependent. So if there's one nutrient that I was ever allowed to give for a man, for an all-encompassing, is zinc. You know, it has to be zinc, you know, all right. 2 to 3 years of stress will cause erectile dysfunction. Now, I don't know who measured that, and of course it depends upon the level of the stress. So that's probably very true, I should think, as far as the level, and obviously the higher the level of the stress, the greater the speed of the erectile dysfunction. Maybe 10 years of slow enduring will do its toll, but 2 to 3 years of stress will start to show. Now, some people like to test the adrenal cortex and the hormones by salivary hormonal tests, which you can do over a period of 4 hours. You can do that yourself. I've done this on update seminars before, where we've given you a chart of 4 hours and days of the month and so on, and all you do is you work around the body clock. Do you remember how you test the hormones using the body clock at different times? Long stress, because it has a detrimental effect on the adrenal cortex, will lead to infection, to allergy, digestive systems, and blood sugar handling tests. So that's a sort of little bit of package and information. So let's have a look at the natural treatments. So you've got a gentleman who's got prostate problems, maybe enlarged prostate, maybe gone to malignancy. Mechanical, general feeling, obviously more from chiropractors and osteopaths and mechanics, is look at the low back and the pelvis because of the amount of blood to the prostate. Okay, we want to stimulate the blood and the nerve supplies. Cranial, because that affects the pituitary and the other major hormones, and all scars. They emphasize a lot this with scars, because scars will stop the flow of lymph. Okay, so scars need to be treated, and ideally adhesions need to be prevented if there has been surgery, or to break them down. And you know, with scars, what you do along a scar is you therapy localize it. And once you've got the person with the right colour, they therapy localize very easily in the scar, in the clear. So you therapy, sorry, I'm getting too close to your camera, aren't I? You therapy localize the scar, strong muscle stays strong, go to another part of the scar, and sometimes you'll find it's one part of the scar, okay? Goes weak, and you use what we call a sustain challenge. So that means you pull it in a direction and you hold it and you test the muscle, hold it in different directions, and the direction that negates the therapy localization is the direction that you treat it in. Okay? So you would treat it by stretching it. You can treat it with the cough reflex. You can treat it on inspiration or expiration, whichever negates there. You can treat it by stroking ice cube down it, the old way, the old fascial one. And in olden days we used to use a PR spray, it was called, cool ethyl chloride spray, cooling spray to do it. But just manually stretching the scar in the direction that negates the therapy localization, and that stretches the adhesion. Okay? So adhesions around scars, really, really important. And for a man, it's probably going to be, could be a circumcision or other scars in the area, inguinal hernias, and anything that's around surgically in that sort of vicinity. So remember, scars from a mechanical point of view are very important to look at. Yeah, the low back, they were talking low back really about low back mechanical problems, affecting it. You could have a scar, yes, you could have a laminectomy type of scar. Any scar can cause neurological problems, but not only neurological, but also drainage, local drainage, very, very important, particularly lower abdomen. So one of the first things that the panel of experts really talk about is detoxification. And to really look at the different organs of detoxification, which would be your bowel. Most people would agree, get the large intestine working, get the fibre up there, get the liver pathways to work better, and make sure you empty the gallbladder of bile. And most toxins, remember, will come out through the lymph. So they're the sort of major organs that might show up. They seem to be very pro-colonic irrigations. And these can be, these days you can go to a colonic irrigation clinic, or you can get self-administered ones. So you can actually do it yourself in the privacy of your own bathroom. Okay? And I think if you have a colonic irrigation done, you do need to recolonize the colon with probiotic afterwards. They may do it for you on there, but you certainly need to consider recolonizing. Most times when people have had a colonic irrigation, they feel very much better in cleaning themselves and quite refreshed. So detoxification must be able to detox toxic metals. And of course here they emphasize a lot about cleaning the mouth up, and that means of mercury. And that rang a bell for us, of course, because these are primarily blue people, and the blue people can't take mercury. So, mercury really is a no-go for a blue person, and may have a profound effect on the cause of the prostate problem in the first place. Detoxify, obviously, we would do that anyway in our tests, or infectious diseases like funguses, bacteria, and parasites. Okay? So the general cleaning out of the whole body as far as infectious diseases, toxins, etc. Clean out the mouth, root canals. They didn't like root canals at all, and septic foci. Septic foci are like areas, focuses are abscesses around the dental area there, where there's like a cyst, an encapsulated pus area with an infection in it. And this quietly leaks into the lymph and the blood system and really drains people down. Okay, so this is really important. So a good holistic dentist would be able to have a look at the mouth, check for root canals, which are possibly leaking septic foci, leaking amalgams, and so on. Many toxins have estrogen effects, especially from hydroxylated forms. Now these would be your toiletries, cosmetics, which have to be hydroxylated and then methylated or conjugated, can have many estrogen-like effects. Probiotics, especially with inulin to feed the good bacteria in the colon, as we said, very, very important. Inulin is what they call a pre-probiotic. In other words, it's a food for the probiotic to live on. So you don't want the inulin to be absorbed. It has no value inside the body. It contains sugars which are not absorbed, but stay in the intestine so the good bacteria can use it as a food. Some of you might have come across the Master Cleanse. Oh, come across the Master Cleanse? Yeah. Now, patients I've got on the Master Cleanse feel really good on the Master Cleanse. And when they come off the Master Cleanse, they don't feel so good. Okay? So it is a good way, but I think part of the Master Cleanse, why they feel good, is they're avoiding certain foods which are not doing them any good. And I think also they're having a lot of lemon and lime, a lot of citrus there, or citric acid, which helps to spin the Krebs cycle. So I think they feel more energetic because of the citrus side, but it's also because they're probably avoiding milk and grains and so on. The maple syrup is to give them the energy. They must drink plenty of water, or they make this mix up fresh each time, and they need to have 6 to 12 glasses of it a day. Less than 6, it's not as effective as what it should be. So most of the people I know who do it for about 10 days, possibly 2 weeks. So that's called a Master Cleanse. Specific cleanses for the liver, milk thistle, very good. They do a lot of emphasis on cayenne pepper, which is one of those that we do in the spices, of course, maple syrup. Kidney cleanse, detoxify gallbladder flush. Hands up those people who've done a gallbladder flush. Surprising, that's all. I thought most people had done a gallbladder flush at some time. Worth doing once in a lifetime anyway. And some people like to do it regularly when they see what comes out, and really if nothing comes out you're not that impressed, so you probably don't do it again. But some people, you know, really do fill a lot of the toilet up with like lentils, green sort of split pea lentils there. Saunas, again very good for detoxification through the skin, especially with metals and certain chemicals. Diet, antioxidants are generally viewed because of free radicals to protect against reactive oxygen species. New cells grow with good nutrition. Cancer cells love sugar, apparently. Okay, so sugar is a really big enemy to everybody with malignancies. The average intake in the States is 135 pounds of sugar. I think that's an underestimate, probably. And they decrease the size of the Supersize Me Now drinks. That's the latest thing. They're not allowed to drink more than that in one serving. Too much salt and sugar creates inflammation which damages the prostate. So these are just general rules and ideas that we've been saying for years. So decrease the sugar. Barbecue, oh, who was talking about barbecue? Was that at breakfast time? No. Or yesterday. Barbecuing, bad news, sorry. Oh, it was you, Gary, wasn't it? No, somebody. Barbecue grilling causes carcinogenic compounds. So for blue people, you know, they're vegetarians anyway, mostly. So barbecues. So barbecue grilling, you know, where it's char grilling, in other words, is not good. So don't eat the char bit, okay? Not very good. Red meat is full of herbicides, synthetic hormones and pesticides. So try wherever possible with meat to get organic. That goes without saying, because you don't want meat that's full of chemicals from the ground. Much, much worse in America. And of course you've got all the growth hormones and everything else in there. But again, you know, where possible, get organic. Hormones are in the protein part of milk and things, not so much in the fat. So eat organic and live food. Raw food creates alkalinity, which is better for cancerous conditions. So again, you know, basic rules, plenty of raw food. Watch the red meat down there, and this goes anyway because blue people aren't that good on high quantities of red meat, but need some. Raw milk, but not pasteurized. Now this is interesting because it is possible that raw milk contains the enzyme xanthine oxidase and phosphatase enzyme, which keeps our phosphorus levels better under control. Ideally no dairy due to lactose, which we talked yesterday, intolerance and that high insulin-like growth factor and epidermal growth factor. Trans fats and animal fats are bad for the prostate. These are sort of chucked in. That's what we just looked at. See, they're generally, you know, people coming from different spheres have sort of said all the general things that we've been saying for a long time. So supplements, what they suggest is zinc. So top of the pile, top of the hit there, is zinc, 50 milligrams per day. That would be probably equivalent to 4 squirts of our liquid zinc there. Copper, you can see here we've got a 25:1 ratio. Probably the books say 18:20. Magnesium, selenium, we know about Brazil nuts. We find when person needs selenium, pistachios are very good as well. They show up muscle tests very well for people specifically for that. And I was quite surprised when I heard lobster. I thought, well, that's good news, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, okay. So lobster, I need my selenium. Vitamin D3 controls cell proliferation, apparently. Prostate cancer is latitudinal, it's lower in the tropics, so maybe consider 2,000 to 6,000 international units per day. And again, as we talked, most of us hardly ever find vitamin D, even though we're in a temperate zone. Omega-3 essential for the prostate. Fish provides fatty acids in oxidized form, so use vegetable sources, as we said just now. Flax, walnut and pumpkin. Sesame seed oil is high in antioxidants, so good as a massage oil. So you can massage that around there. Anybody want to do a workshop? Good as a massage oil. So sesame seed, that's why we put in the Wonder Oil, the blend of peanut and sesame in all our oils. So anybody wants a massage oil, it's got the Wonder Oil, so it's got the sesame seed in it. Iodine has been shown to stimulate cancer cell apoptosis, or cell program death. So iodine is really, really important. We found that, I found that 20 years ago when I put together a product called Adrenal Support. You probably all remember that one. And that was the basis of potassium and magnesium iodide to help limit the conversion of testosterone to estradiol and to make sure the estradiol and estrone were interchangeable. 96% of prostate cancer cases have iodine deficiency. That is enormous, so very, very important. Only 10% of iodine in salt is available, and that's because it's sodium iodide. Sodium iodide is not the most biological form of iodide. Magnesium and potassium is. Vitamin C, there's a lot of interest in vitamin C. 1 to 2 grams per day, which is quite a high amount. So either a gram a couple of times a day, or ideally I would suggest 500 milligrams 2 or 3 times a day. And it may be in some clinics they give it IV, intravenously. Antioxidants, we mentioned before, A, C and E. And we know, and we talked about this yesterday, that melatonin has a strong relationship to cancers because all cancer cases seem to have sleep problems. So there's a link in missing the circadian rhythms of dark and light. Lycopene, we talked about again when the lady with the eye problem, but in relationship to tomatoes, red grape, watermelon and strawberries, a lot of interest in lycopene with cancer in the prostate. Okay, they say that tomatoes are good, but the tomato paste is the best. And according to what doctors don't tell you, organic tomato sauce is far superior with the amount of lycopene to ordinary tomato sauce. So there is one company, at least, that does an organic tomato sauce, but you can't buy it in all supermarkets. So look for it as an organic. It's much higher in lycopene than the non-organic. Yeah, much higher than even tomato sauce. So making dishes with tomato puree is probably the highest form of lycopene you can get. And you know that because you've gone out with light-coloured trousers and you drop the tomato sauce or paste on there, it stains. And if you've ever worked with lycopene, boy, it is a stain. It's bright red and it's an oily substance. It's difficult to get off. It's a real food colourer. So obviously the paler things like watermelon seed, red grapefruits are not that high, strawberries in lycopene. They've got it, but it's not as high as tomatoes. And tomato paste is much higher than tomato sauce, but organic tomato sauce is better than non-organic. Phytonutrients tablets, according to, this is from herbalists, tablets, in their opinion, are a complete waste of time as far as taking as herbals. They don't get absorbed. That's tablets. Herbs should be picked where they're grown. Okay, in other words, you should use herbs indigenous to this country, ideally. Okay, leaves are best picked not during the flowering season, so they should be picked at the time when the flower's gone, so that the sap is right. Okay, and the vital nutrients. the energy goes to the flower when it's in flower for reproduction. Ones that they consider, obviously saw palmetto, long history there. I don't know whether you can still get saw palmetto. It doesn't grow here, no. It only grows in the swamps of Florida and that sort of area. But it's not that you say you can't get it, but as a capsule. What? Yeah. Yeah. Well, you'll be able to get it on the internet from the States anyway. You don't have to worry about, if you want it, you just go to the internet. Okay, genistine, Pygeum africanum, coriander or cilantro, we know because we do that one, and dandelion leaves. Therapeutic foods to consider: fresh fruit, vegetables. This is a lovely mix: celery, apple and carrot. Now you use a juicer, vegetable juicer there, and you put in your apple. Again, ideally organic, all these if possible, and if they're not, make sure you wash them with a bit of vinegar in the water, let them soak to get the, act as a solvent to get the pesticides and things off. So a couple, usually for one dose, couple, Brian, of sticks of celery, an apple and a nice big organic carrot. Okay? Put that through the juicer, and all men should have that for breakfast. Seafood and kelp as rich sources of iodine. So seafood and kelp. Kelp is that seaweed extract which we make as a vegetable, sea vegetable flavouring, we call it. Wonderful in scrambled eggs and other foods. So when you mix your eggs up, put a few sprinkles of kelp in there, and it gives a lovely flavour to it. And it's a good way of getting kelp in. Okay, here's the energy pathway. We know this is called glycolysis, or this pathway from glucose. Here's our friend pyruvate, and here's acetyl-CoA. Okay? This is the mitochondrial membranes. So if we can't convert pyruvate to acetyl-CoA, we shunt it to lactic acid. And that's what we talked about this morning. Build up of lactic acid creates pain in the nociceptors, in the muscles, etc. If we can convert to acetyl-CoA, we can then put that into the Krebs cycle. But if we can't produce enough acetyl-CoA, we can't produce the acetyl part for acetylcholine. So down goes our immune system, because we need acetylcholine for our brain and for our parasympathetic system and our immune system. If, on the other hand, we have a block here, because we've got low thyroid function, low magnesium, etc., we get a build-up of acetyl-CoA. It shunts this way, and it goes into making the saturated fatty acid and cholesterol. Okay? What was it, Fatima, you were telling me just now what happened to you? Because she's so pleased Fatima's become a red. So she's going out on the booze tonight, but she knew she always was a red for the following reasons, didn't you? Yeah. Yeah. So this is the thing that people don't, they sort of know that there's something wrong, but you don't fit the bill. What were you before? Green blue, yeah. So she's completely different from what she's become. Yes. So she's a different person now, she knows, and she's delighted.
And can I say why all this has happened? Because I've changed my diet to work with my liver. I've been seeing an acupuncturist who recommended I do certain things, and with the needles and the diet, and mainly my diet has changed. Very little supplements. And that was done it, I'm sure of it. I've always been really so that you're thinking. Yes, there's nothing happening. Absolutely. Well, obviously, yeah.
Well, we're going to find that out in a minute.
Yeah, it's a combination.
So as soon as we finish this, we will find out about Fatima's thinking. Don't we all want to know? Yes. Yeah.
If somebody is taking warfarin, you have to be careful with some of those antioxidants.
K is one you have to, and CoQ10 you have to be careful with, don't you? But I can't, A, C and E, I don't think you need to worry about the antioxidants too much. No. I'm going to do a précis. These are what people have chucked in. Yeah, people who are into antioxidants, you must take antioxidants for everything. People have taken selenium ace for years, haven't they? I can remember people back in the mid-70s taking selenium ace to prevent, and most of them have gone on to go gaga and all sorts of things. So I don't think antioxidants are all they're cracked out to be. Antioxidants are not the major way that the body protects against free radicals. It uses SOD and catalase, the enzymes are the major way. And those enzymes are copper, zinc, manganese dependent, much more than taking vitamin A's. It uses antioxidants as the next pathway of protection, okay? But if you then leave all those old rancid oxidized materials in the body, and then you become rancid. And what you've got to do is to remove those by putting the right oils and the right other nutrients in.
The oils would be fine.
Yes,
Yes,
yeah,
it's
yeah.
the vitamin K is the culprit with the warfarin, but evidently if you are eating lots of beans, which is of course, there's lots of foods that are source of vitamin K and aspirin, when you're on warfarin, the best thing to do is to keep your diet consistent, because they can change the warfarin dose.
Yeah, well this person has that's reducing the rest of my diet, and my mum goes to
Yeah, but that's fine, but if you can adjust the warfarin rather than make it it's just a paper.
So I put my remote down somewhere.
Oh, no?
Oh, it's on the table there. Okay. So, hypoxia is a lack of oxygen. So think of it, really, energy production here is getting the fuel as far as the kitchen. Then this is the front door, or the kitchen door to open out, and this is the burner, okay? So if we can get it to here, we've got the fuel inside the burner, okay? Now there's one other very important part to getting the fuel and getting the flame and the energy production, and that's getting the air in there. If you put the damper in on the burner and you fill it up with fuel, it'll just smoke and go out. And this is basically the problem. If there's not the draw with the oxygen, so you've got to have the oxygen to get the energy production right up. So hypoxia is a big, big problem and leads towards degeneration because you can't create the amount of energy, and if you can't produce the amount of energy, and then the cell finally dies. Okay, and if that's a neuron, it'll die much quicker than others because it needs more energy than anywhere else. So with hypoxia, always think about iron, and then we use the citrated form, very important, hydroxycobalamin, and if the person has a polymorphism, they need the adenosylcobalamin or the methylcobalamin rather than the hydroxycobalamin. Water, I think everybody's in agreement, 1 to 2 litres per day. Generally low sodium water, lower than 20 parts per million. Higher, ideally, magnesium to calcium ratio. So the nearer you can get equal calcium magnesium, the better. This is one of if you can read that one, this is one of the worst mineral waters in Britain.
I brought my own today.
You brought your own. This, I'm proud, comes from where I used to live in Hampshire. Why they're using Hilton is one of the most expensive rip-offs in the whole country. What's the figure on there? You can read that. Of calcium to magnesium, it's calcium is 97, 1.7. So that's a ratio of 60, is it to 1? Because that's what Andover tap water was when I was there, and that's produced just down the road at Stockbridge. And it's got aluminium in it. So, really good. Okay. So why, in a hotel like this, do they, in the Hilton, they use nice Scottish water, and that was a nice one in glass bottles, and it's a good, much better ratio, and it's much cheaper. That's, vastly overrated and sold. Because they marketed it in Harrods and other big shops, it's got a name for itself. Glass bottle, ideally, you can do your own, of course, in Miron. What we do is we just use Evian, which is a good ratio as well, and put it into Miron, half an hour in the sun to give it the extra energy. Water hydrotherapy was something that came up, hot and cold. The contrast is a phenomenal change in the circulation in people when they take hot and cold or sitz baths and so on. It increases the circulation, it increases the lymph, it increases the immunity, it increases the parasympathetic nervous activity, and apparently it increases the meditation ability, so it settles the whole system. So just taking a hot shower and then sitting in cold water, or spraying your backside, this is for the men, with hot and cold. It's very stimulating. Heat. Cancer tissues react to heat. This is the old, do you remember back in the 1970s, there was a runner called Lillian Board, and she died of, they thought it was Crohn's disease, but it was actually colon cancer. Went to a clinic of Dr. Issel's. Remember Dr. Issel's in Germany? And he was one of the first to use alternative medicines and ideas for treating cancer. And heat was one of his big things. Then he used to boil them up, really. I'm sorry, we used to call them blanket baths. They used to heat them up, make them really sweat. Now what they do is they put hypothermia treatment with electrodes. It's a bit more scientific and try and, heat destroys the cancer cells. So this is a German treatment, but there is some benefit probably to heating the body up. Saunas, heat here. Emotions, we know that stress lowers the immune response. The prime emotion that you will find often expressed by a person with a malignancy is anger, but the cause, when you get down to this, is guilt and blame. And it's very interesting because guilt and blame is the gallbladder, which equates with low acetylcholine. And acetylcholine is one of the major neuropeptides of the parasympathetic running of the body and stimulating the immune response. So it has been shown that it demonstrates that it regulates natural killer cells. So when you're low in acetylcholine, you probably will decrease your activity of natural killer or NK cells. So there's a lot of evidence on this. So low levels of acetylcholine, low antibodies, low parasympathetics. So it does not mean that everybody who shows to guilt and blame has got or will have a cancer. Okay? But it does seem to be, and I have, since doing this work with the crossing in there, I can verify that all cancer cells do show, all patients with cancer do toe to G and B.
Doesn't matter which cancer?
No.
Or is it
No. Okay. Anger and hate are usually how it manifests. If they go back, Alan, you can probably see here, we go back about the emotions. You should find gallbladder here somewhere. I think it's back in liver. There. Would you like to just read that out as you've got closer and you can read that?
Gallbladder meridian.
Can you read that nice and loud? Gallbladder meridian. This is a précis of.
Meridian. The emotions associated with this meridian are guilt and blame. This is used to manipulate and punish.
Punish is the word here.
Punish manifests itself in a variety of expressions such as remorse, self-recrimination, masochism, and all the symptoms of victimhood. Unconscious guilt results in psychosomatic disease, accident proneness, and suicidal behaviors. Guilt domination results in a preoccupation with sin, an unforgiving emotional attitude, frequently exploited by religious demagogues who use it for coercion and control, such as sin and salvation, and salvation merchants, obsessed with punishment, are likely either to acting out their own guilt or projecting it into others. Guilt provokes rage and killing. Frequently it is its expression.
So that's why you see anger and hate from these people, but that's not it. It's the guilt projected out onto other people, and that's how you see it. And there's a lot of anger in there, there's a lot of vengeance, but there's a lot of self-destruct. Okay, very, very interesting how it goes on to create it. And as I say, what you will find now, you've got another marker. Remember your markers at the moment. A, you've got person with cancer is blue. B, they got high D-lactic acid. C, they're hypoxic. Okay, now you've got that they've usually got the emotion we found as guilt and blame. So you're building up a nice little repertoire of possibilities that this person is heading down that way. Jill's a great believer that expressed anger is better than suppressed anger. I don't like it now. Yes, I know. But getting it out of the system is better than letting it boil inside there.
Passive aggressive to us.
Is what?
Passive aggressive is terrible.
Passive aggression, undercover. Oh, you seethe for how to get your vengeance over a period of time.
There is a way to express one's anger without blaming somebody else.
Right.
I feel that way. If
You-
we put it in the I,
I feel that way. So it's
not rather than blaming the person and making them feel guilty about what's your issue about the anger. If I put it in I feel this way about it, so it's my issue. It's not. I'm not blaming anyone else. So perhaps it's the way we
Instead of saying you make me feel.
yes, I feel very good. Okay, remember that. I feel this way. You can say that as well. I feel.
I can say I feel angry about leaving the room in the mess.
Oh, really? I must teach my daughter this one. How do you teach a 14-year-old girl to keep her room tidy?
Just keeping it in the I. Then
The I. Right. You have a different way. You say, I am disappointed when your children are upset. Say, I am disappointed with you. And they go, oh, I'm sorry, Mum. She can bend a 6'4" rugby playing monster into a, oh, sorry, Mum. I'm disappointed in you. Okay. Right, there are suppressed emotions within a tumour. This is generally considered to be, this is the emotional side, what's actually in the tumour itself. 2 ways to tackle the problem: source the infinite intelligence. This is Deepak Chopra, needless to say. Guided. You did the original Deepak Chopra, didn't you? That's how we met, wasn't it? On Get to be the change, wasn't it? In London. Coming back to me now. Guided journey within to discover cell memories of repressed emotions that have got stored. Yeah, when a cell dies, it hands on the repressed emotion to the new cell. So all our cells are replacing, and unfortunately, cancer cells go on and on and on replacing themselves. Deeply buried and need to be released, and forgive yourself and life in all that has happened. Relax and let go to heal. Whoa, it's dead easy, isn't it? That's Deepak. Energy medicine. Energy medicine helps even when invasive medical treatments are being used. So all forms of energy medicine, from homeopathy to tapping to emotional freedom technique, they're all good. So affirmations, tree essences, gemstone essences, they're all good. So emotion, we know, is caused by perception because we've been doing that all weekend. So a very good example of that is blushing. So you actually see a physical change in somebody when they're emotionally embarrassed. So prostate cancer is controlled in the brainstem in 100% of cases. This is interesting. Every time you get one, put brainstem tissue extract from your kit in and see what happens. 90% of prostate cancer has emotional trauma, and they're unable to find the solution to the problem. Most men don't talk about their problems. They feel alone in their conflict. The conflict may be with children, grandchildren, wife. Often they're retired and don't have a purpose in life. So to cure prostate, you have to change your lifestyle and your spirituality. So, to summarize that is all on the sheet, wherever the sheet is. So the sheet will be on the internet beginning of the week. So what I've done is I've done an A4 sheet with all those things put down, so all the things to look for, okay? So it's like a checklist. So if a patient comes in with prostate, and you can do the same checklist with any cancer, and especially breast cancer, very similar, because you're looking at the same hormonal dependent things. And you think to yourself, yeah, when they come back and say, well, what about vitamin D? You say, yeah, check that, done that. And so you looked at all the things that all the experts have said, so you'll be one step ahead, all right? But you're going to be one step even more ahead because you're going to do the mind now. So those of you who cut your acetates up, we can now go ahead. So let's do a bit of workshopping now, and let's see where you're all coming from. So if you want to be treated, then now's your chance to be treated. I wouldn't miss the opportunity. You know, I do the reflexes here, do left, right, eyes, ears and things, and get yourself sorted out before you go back, and then lock it in with the right nutrients and the chemistry. And before you actually do the scratching and the tickling and all that sort of thing, find out the muscle associated with the meridian. So find the meridian, do the two-handed therapy localizer, find the muscle associated, and you'll be amazed just how weak that muscle is. Do you remember those abdominals that we did? Just nothing there at all. And let's have a bit of fun. Okay, so workshop now.
End of chapter 13.